we are now in the process of developing 2 residential assisted living homes in a suburb of Houston called Tomball.
As you start to get in this game a little bit deeper, is that you actually want to create a system and a process and a business that you don't have to be there all the time.
And I ended up in inpatient rehab in May of 2019 for alcohol abuse. Anybody can make 20 minutes a day for something that is important to them.
The type of housing that they have and the support and service is out of this world, man.
I'm going to either delegate it to a virtual assistant, or I'm going to find an automation.
Because your parents end up going into, they end up being not the superheroes.
You know, I had to exercise the worst parts of myself and reinvent a better version of me.
Aaron, officially welcome to the Wealth Juice podcast. Corey and I are so excited to have you on the show, man. It's an honor to have you here, and we appreciate you joining us.
Awesome. Thanks so much for having me. I've been a longtime listener and fan, and very honored to be here.
Awesome, man. Well, we appreciate it. So we actually had the pleasure of you coming chat with our community a couple of weeks back, and we talked about a number of things. About one of them was the 20-minute investor, then how you hired VAs to outsource a bunch of your life and make it more efficient in every aspect. So we're going to dive into a lot of that stuff in the episode, but I want to take people back. Corey and I know you as a hybrid investor, right? Someone that has their 9-to-5 job and then also still invest in real estate, building generational wealth for your family. So take us through the whole thing, maybe back to kind of what you're doing in the 9-to-5 and then how you balance everything. And we'll ask you questions along the way.
Yeah, sounds good. I'll do my best to keep it digestible. But I live in Houston, Texas with my wife and my 3 young children. We have a 3-year-old daughter and identical 1-year-old twins. So we got a busy household here, but by day I work as a management consultant. So I flex between a business analyst and a project manager for a company that works with primarily Fortune 500 companies. So I focus on process design, change management, and a few other different types of organizational specialties. If that all sounded like gibberish, you're not alone, because usually when I say I'm a consultant, people's eyes glaze over. But I do that by day, and by night for the last almost 7 years now, my wife and I have been building a portfolio of rental properties. So we actually bought 8 rental properties across 3 states. There's plenty of story behind why 3 states, but we're grateful that we built that up to about, at its peak, about a $5,000 per month net profit. So it made, not only was it building wealth, but it created a very meaningful income stream for us. All the while, though, we started having children. And when we had kids, when you have 1, it's disruptive financially. When you have 3 in 3 years, it totally flipped the table on us. So our financial lives changed very quickly, which forced us to reevaluate a lot of the strategy that we used to build that initial portfolio. So today, if we fast forward all the way, we are now in the process of developing 2 residential assisted living homes in a suburb of Houston called Tomball. So that'll be our first ground up development project. And they're 10,000 square foot luxury builds. They'll be licensed for memory care, which allows us to serve residents with Alzheimer's and dementia. It is a highly profitable business model, but the part that we love most, especially for my wife and I, is that it's an impact investment too. It's going to serve a critical need in society for senior care in the decades to come. But we're really leveraging a lot of the skills and knowledge and income and all sorts of different assets that we've built up throughout the years in our professional careers and from our first chapter of our real estate journey to drive success in our current one. So that is the most basic nutshell I can give, and I'm happy to go any direction you like.
Yeah, Aaron, when you and I met, it was actually when you found out, I guess it was 2.5 years ago, maybe at this point, you found out that you were having twins. And I remember just chatting with you because we met in another mastermind, and I remember how much that impacted or shifted the way that you thought about things. Before we get into that and some of the stuff that Ryan and I love to talk about, which is family, you have a unique position of why you got into real estate. And I don't even know if I knew this when we first met, or even up until a couple weeks ago when you chatted with our community. You mentioned about just some inner demons and some things you were battling. So talk to us about how real estate changed your life and the decision to go into it and the spot that you were in when you ultimately made that choice.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's important, to have a sense of why. I'm sure, people hear that all over the place, but it really is true, especially when you're doing something that's challenging and requires marginal effort, right? Anytime you're working full time and balancing your own priorities and trying to build something on the side, if you don't have a strong why, pretty high chance you're going to give up, if you hit a big friction point. But for me, I was in my mid-20s working. We lived in Las Vegas. I was working in the entertainment industry, concerts specifically. So I worked full-time normal office hours in the Monday through Friday. And then I would be out at shows 3 or 4 nights a week working. It's a glamorous industry. People would always turn and say, wow, that's so cool what you're doing for a living. And it was cool in a lot of ways, but it also it came at a cost. Not only was I putting in all those hours, but it's very stressful. It's an ego-driven industry, a lot of not so great behavior. And especially if you're a junior employee trying to climb the ranks, you got to tolerate quite a few things that I don't think maybe anybody should have to tolerate. But all that to say, I turned to my own inner demons. I built my own bad series of habits that became cyclical. I found myself on a downward spiral, drinking like a fish, and just trying to dull this sense of futility in my head that, hey, I'm working 70, 80 hours a week. It's really fun, but I don't see a path forward from here. And I felt really capped. I felt like my upside at that company was akin to spinning, a wheel and hoping you're going to win the lottery. You just got to wait for somebody to retire, or there wasn't a clear path to really growing. And so I became very depressed. I became very mentally, I like to call it, spiritually bankrupt, I guess. Like I really kind of ran out of motivation to do just about anything. And I ended up in inpatient rehab in May of 2019 for alcohol abuse. I spent a couple weeks there in inpatient, and then I started a very, very disciplined, regimented recovery program. And I had to ask myself all these very difficult questions about my motivations and what I wanted from my life, and also how I wanted to interact and behave as a person. So anyway, all that centering and all that inner work led me to the realization that I don't like feeling like I have a cap. I don't like feeling like, there's someone standing above me with their hand pushing down on my head. I really wanted to unlock the upside that I know, I can create value in the world and be able to actually capture that upside for myself instead of feeding it strictly into a corporation. Now I say all that, and Ryan at the top mentioned, you guys know me as the hybrid investor because I work full time, which is true. I still value full-time employment. I believe it plays a very important role in most people's wealth building journey. However, for me, the big unlock was realizing that you can build something on the side that has that upside potential. And not only can you put your own vision and heart behind it, but those assets can work for you in the background while you're still, making progress in other areas of your life. So I don't know if that answered your question.
Yeah, it did. I want to get into the portfolio and how that got moving, because we talk to a lot of people that get started in real estate investing. And I think when people don't know how to get started, they think there's this big, this analysis, and you're looking at this graph, and you're looking at that graph, and you're like you're cross analyzing, and you're like, what's the cap rate, and what, all these things. When it comes down to it, a lot of people just dive in head first, and they figure it out along the way. And I think that's what you did. So talk to us about those first couple deals. Real estate's very forgiving. You get in, you hold on long enough, you'll probably end up making money unless you do something horrible. But for the most part, if you just make moves and you continuously press the ball and move the ball down the field, good things start to happen. So talk to us about your first couple deals that you did. And I want to know, I know you're in multiple markets now, so give us a taste of that.
Yeah, I think chapter 1 is oftentimes one of the most important parts of any story, because you got to start in order to make any measurable progress, right? So for us, we were living in Vegas. I had this kind of inner journey, reworking and recovering from a difficult situation that I put myself in. But all along that path, I had been married to my wife. We got married in 2018. We bought a primary house down there, so we were able to get married in our backyard. And we actually, by doing so, the money that we would have spent on a big lavish wedding, we still had in our account that we were able to use to buy our first rental property. And so we didn't know a whole lot about the actual mechanics. Like, we didn't read Bigger Pockets books. We didn't listen to podcasts at that time. My parents are investors. So I kind of called them up after I had this emotional journey I was going on. And I explained that, that I wanted to find different ways to unlock value in my life outside of my job. And they shared about their real estate experience. But ultimately, when we bought that first house, we didn't know how to analyze the deal. We just knew we had a chunk of change and we wanted to try it because we understood conceptually that if you own real estate for a long time and somebody's paying you rent that's higher than your mortgage, that's a good thing. Like, that's approximately how much we knew. And I always say that if I knew then what I know now, we probably wouldn't have bought that house. We ended up putting 30% down. It was newly built from the ground up. There was no real opportunity to add value. but it did create a stable rental in our portfolio. We actually just sold that house like a couple weeks ago and used it to fund some of what we're doing now. But the most important part about doing that was that deal objectively was not a great deal. We did make money off of it. It did appreciate. We were able to turn it into something else. But what was most important was that what it led to, which is 4 months after we bought that house, the agent that sold it to us called us and he said, "Hey, I have 2 houses that are currently leased to these assisted living operators. They're on 5-year commercial style leases. There's 0 vacancy ever. It's guaranteed by a company that's been in business for almost 50 years, and they want to stay in the house forever. Are you interested?" I don't know who would ever say no to that question, of whether they're interested or not, because that sounds pretty good to me. Mm-hmm. But at that time, we didn't know what we know now. So it was really above our head. And I guess the point I'm trying to make is that, in some ways that was like manna falling from the heaven. It was an amazing opportunity that we just happened to be in the right place at the right time. But I would argue if we didn't take that first step and buy that first rental, then of course it wouldn't have happened, right? So trying to balance like getting stuck with analysis paralysis versus the bias for action is probably one of the hardest things to do, especially at the beginning. But we're glad we jumped in. Even if today I wouldn't buy that same deal, I'm really glad we did when we did, because that truly has led to where we are now.
You kind of created this hybrid investor thing like out of nowhere too, because you were moving to different places and that kind of forced you to figure out systems and processes and put you in place where you didn't have to go to the properties all the time. There's a lot of people get involved in the beginning and they're like, "Oh, I want to be within 15, 20 minutes. I want to be able to go stop there." And what you realize is as you start to get in this game a little bit deeper is that you actually want to create a system and a process and a business that you don't have to be there all the time. Now, in the beginning, it's great. You should learn what you like, learn what you don't like, learn how to build the system yourself. But you happen to be someone that I met that is really good at putting these processes and systems together better than us, at least better than me for sure. So talk to us about how you created a 20-minute investor. That's kind of what you teach here, the 20-minute investor system that allows you to manage these properties and do things remotely while you still you're working your 40 to 50 hours a week, plus having 3 kids, all under the age of 4.
Yeah. I mean, I wish I could say it was intentional, but a lot of it was just basically observing different things that we did in our business over the last 7 years. And some of the things that we did well, some of the things that we didn't do well, and figuring out how to map that into the constraints of our life. So I have one business partner, Nathan. He and I formed an academy together where he and I used to be in a mastermind group that met pretty frequently, just like the pod that I was in with you, Corey. And we met every week for almost 2 years. So we got to know each other really well. And we found out that we had a very similar philosophy. We both had young kids. We both had full-time jobs that we weren't interested in, just leaving right away. We believe that those are assets that can help fuel our wealth building journey, build our skills, et cetera. And so once we identified that we had that overlapping philosophy, we tried to kind of dissect like what allowed us to be successful while still having all those constraints. And it boiled down to time management, right? It boiled down to how do I get the most squeeze out of the time that I do have? So the 20-minute investor, the idea is that anybody has 20 minutes a day, honestly, save for the extreme scenarios, anybody can make 20 minutes a day for something that is important to them. And if you do that, and if, I think probably most people listening to this have heard Parkinson's law, tasks will take up as much time as you allow them, right? So if the college semester paper is the best example, right? People give an entire semester, but everyone starts working on it a week before it's due. Well, if you only gave yourself a week to do it, we all know everyone can do it in a week because that's what people do. So, if you compress time and you give yourself constraints to work around, then you force yourself to adapt. And so I think our constraints were born out of necessity, but what we started figuring out was how can I fill these buckets of time to move the ball down the field? So analyzing deals is something, especially for residential rental properties within our own buy box, that's something that can take 2 to 3 minutes, right, for an initial underwriting. If you have teams set up in place that they already know your buy box, they know your parameters, you're pre-approved, like you got to reduce the friction everywhere you possibly can. And a lot of these motions, whether it's sending out offers, if you have a certain amount of offers you want to send per week, whether it's doing due diligence, all these things can be compressed and fit into small chunks of time. And so I think, we've and I'm happy to share this with your audience, we put together a workshop where we basically broke down all the different workflows Sometimes you're looking for properties, sometimes you're just maintaining, but all the different ways that we spend 20-minute blocks and how those grew both of us independently to that, $5,000 per month net profit across long distance rentals.
Yeah, that would be amazing, man. Also, I want to kind of piggyback on that same thought. You're very efficient with your time. And you mentioned, it seems like you're more of an integrator based on kind of what you do for the W-2. And then also just how you kind of sliver away your day to day and make it in bite-sized chunks, right? To take things down that might seem, overwhelming for others. So can you talk about how you've hired virtual assistants, also known as VAs for people that are hearing this for the first time, to help you outsource a lot of different parts of your life, whether that's professional life or home life?
Yeah, no, absolutely. So for some reason, amidst having children and running rental properties and working full time, I decided, modeled largely after people like yourselves, that I was going to start a podcast in 2023. And I still run that podcast. But what that honestly did was that was kind of the tipping point where I stopped having additional time to do some of those maintenance activities, bookkeeping, administrative work for the rentals. Like I just ran out of time. So I had to figure out, do I either not do this podcast or do I figure out how to delegate or automate it? And so I came up with this framework at this time. It's not novel, but this is just a lens that I use for decisions, where if a task has been repeated more than twice and it doesn't involve decision making, then I'm going to capture that workflow and I'm going to either delegate it to a virtual assistant, or I'm going to find an automation, ideally free, that can handle that task for me. And so I have worked with fractional VAs since 2022. And essentially what that means is I think a lot of people shy away from VAs for a few reasons. Number one is usually trust. But number two is that when you hire an employee, you have to figure out what to do with them. And if the whole reason you're hiring them is because you're disorganized and in disarray with how you spend your time, then adding one other person to look after and delegate to is probably going to hurt more than it's going to help. But with that fractional model, what I learned and what's been so useful to me is that I could find those little tasks that take me 5 or 10 minutes per week. And if I just ask myself that question once a week, what tasks happened in the prior week that were repeated multiple times and didn't require a decision? And if I can buy back my time 5 or 10 minutes or 20 minutes at a time, well, if my whole system is built on being able to run 20 minutes a day, and I freed up 20 minutes of time, well, I basically bought a day worth of productivity for, less than $10. So that's how I grew to think of it. And it's not like I had one moment where I delegated everything I ever do to a VA. It's just iterative, and you find areas where they can be helpful. And then you mentioned too, your personal life, right? Like, so when we moved across the country, our VAs helped us plot out our trip and research different moving companies and price out storage and whatever else we needed to do. Because, as one might imagine, moving across the country, with kids is not that easy. So even just finding ways to get time back in my personal life has made an enormous impact and allowed me to continue to do all these things at the same time.
I think a lot of people get overwhelmed when they hear the word virtual assistant, or they're like, what even is this? So can you talk about where, I know you're specific to fractional VAs, but there's also VAs out there that work by the hour. And these are, they're found, a lot of them are that we've seen and heard of in the real estate investing industry are from the Philippines, and onlinejobs.ph is just a resource for people that are listening that want to look and kind of find their way. But can you talk about where you found success in these people? And then also, while you're answering that, or before you answer that, I just wanted to chime in and say one thing about, it's really easy to showcase a task to someone. I think it's hard to type it out sometimes, and people get overwhelmed. They're like, hey, how can I show them exactly how I do this thing? A cheat code that we've learned, Corey and myself, and I'm sure, Aaron, you do the same thing. But there's a website called Loom, not Zoom, which everybody's very familiar with, but it's with an L. And it allows you to capture your screen and then record yourself. And you get to show like your SOPs and how you specifically do each task. So you can share your screen, walk through exactly how you do something, and send that video link to the VA so they can log in with your credentials, or if you add them as a user, and can literally do exactly what you're doing to free up those times. As long as there's no creative thought process in there, which you mentioned, it becomes really easy. I think that's where it gets hard, where you're like, hey, does this require an extra level of brain capacity where I need to put my creative spin on this? Or is this very black and white, menial task, where more like an administrative task, right? That's just taking up some of your time. I think that's where you really offload the task. But back to you, where did you find your VAs, and maybe it's changed over time?
Yeah, so I've worked with a couple of different companies. I have one primary company I use called Excel Stone they've been fantastic. And I think, when I spoke to your community, we were talking about how trust is actually the biggest barrier for VAs. It's not finding them. It's finding someone that you feel you can trust, that you can depend on them. And you also just know that, again, you're not trying to take on a full-time job by bringing on an employee. You're looking for help. And so what I found was I met this company through a referral, someone that I trust already. So that helped with the trust part. And then I was interacting directly with the founder, and his job and his flow was that he would meet with you, learn about your business, talk through some of the pain points that you have. And he would even, they would do some free hours of work, and they would even draft a set of SOPs for, 1 or 2 workflows for you, so you can get a flavor of what it's like to work with them. So the onus was not on you to come up with this complex, comprehensive documentation. It was really a way to test drive that, like, okay, he would ask me, show me something that you do. And we would either be live on a call, or I'd send a video, like you said, and they came back to me with SOPs for my own processes. And I'll tell you, probably pretty nerdy niche thing to be excited about. But when somebody sends you a SOP for your own process that you didn't have to create for yourself, and and then they can run with that same task from there forward, it's a pretty liberating feeling, especially if you're short on time to begin with. As far as how to find people, there are the sites like you mentioned. There are a number of different ones that are prominent within real estate. Some real estate influencers even have adopted, buying VA companies and integrating it into the services that they offer because it's so common. My thing is, if it's a project-based one-time thing, then probably doing something like an Upwork or a Fiverr, where you can scope. Like, I had a custom financial model built, and I just went straight to Upwork. That was, an easy way to get a very specific task done that has a start and an end date. If I want ongoing administrative work, I have that company that I work with, that they'll handle anything administrative in nature, including the SOPs and the ongoing maintenance, and they do it fractionally. I have a different VA for my content that I also met through a referral. He helps me with short form and podcast editing. And so I've just tried to find the right people in the right seats based on the different types of tasks I need. And I have no idea how I would keep this many things in the air if I didn't have that team behind me.
I think it's great, man. You reminded me of something. We've been trying to get Dan Martell on the podcast. He's blown up over the past 5 or 6 years in a personal brand, actually even less, 2 or 3 years in the personal brand space, known as the #1 coach for founders and CEOs. Buy Back Your Time is a book he wrote. But he said that the #1 person that any CEO or founder or business owner should hire is the first person is the executive assistant. So this is kind of like what you're saying, is like hiring a VA to be that quasi-executive assistant, get some of these tasks done, rather than say, I'm going to go hire somebody who's going to run my business. No, you run your business. You're the founder and you're the CEO for a period of time. You hire out the tasks that don't need you. And I think that you've done a great job of that, which has, sparked our interest in recent weeks and months of just continuing our conversations, because Ryan's so much better at this than me in terms of just delegating and putting people in the right spots and doing the integrator stuff. I'm just like a chicken with my head cut off sometimes, just trying to move our business forward. But I think this is all great stuff. The thing that I want to touch on now is your transition from owning rental properties to residential assisted living. It's a big hot topic these days. We know, I'm drawing a blank on her name, Ryan. Maybe you know her name, but
Isabel.
Yes, Isabel
Guarino.
Yes, we had her on our podcast probably 2, 3, 4 months ago. She was great. She was the only person that I talked to that was in the space. And I know that I'm seeing it all over social now. It's kind of in a way like Airbnb in 2020, 2021. It's like this, it's very hot, but I think that there's like you said, a bigger meaning behind it, and there's profitability, and the boomer generation is now phasing into that assisted living time period in their life. And there's not enough supply. So talk to us about what you're doing with that, how that came to be, and just tell us that story there.
Yeah, so no, I appreciate the opportunity to talk about this. I'll start with the macro problem. So there are 77 million baby boomers that are aging into their elder years. There's over 4,000 people per day that are turning 85 and older. And there's already projected to be a 1 million bed shortage for assisted living currently, right? And that's projected to get worse as those trends play out over time. So this isn't just I see an opportunity in the market, let me go create a product. This has the potential to be a full-fledged crisis of availability as the population ages. So the first and foremost, like, I think it's important to recognize how serious that could be. A society that is unable to support its citizens is a difficult thing to overcome. Second is, this is a very personal thing for my wife and I. Her father had early onset dementia, diagnosed when she was 19, spent 7 years in a big box nursing facility, really poor quality of care, really bad experience. It traumatized her, and he unfortunately passed away in 2017. She saw so many things that she did not appreciate about the way that they communicated with her, the type of care they were providing, and the overall environment. These big box facilities are pretty depressing. They feel like a hospital. It's a sterilized environment. It often smells. It feels like the furthest thing from home. So residential assisted living is really the antidote to that experience, right? It's meant to create a home-like environment. It's built and operated to feel like home so that people who are going through the hardest thing that they're probably ever going to go through, and their families are too, watching their loved ones go through these things, at a minimum, they can feel okay and ideally good about where their loved one is placed. So that's the underlying idea is this opportunity to provide a better experience than what my wife had to go through with her dad. And so that was the underlying seed of inspiration that led us in this direction. Now, I think, Brian, you had a question?
Oh, I was going to jump in whenever you're ready.
Yeah, go ahead.
All right. So it's actually very timely we're talking to you, dude. And I was actually thinking about you this weekend. That's why I put my finger up here. I wanted to chat. So my grandmother, probably about, 6 years ago, she's 92 right now. So, subtract whatever that is in mid 80s. Right. And then dementia hit her out of nowhere. And it was like a big shaking within our family. And she was living about like an hour and a half away from my parents at the time. And it was just a hike to go up to the city to like take care of her and make sure her day-to-day was okay. And so they were debating moving her into their home or putting her in a nursing home, or this new thing called a residential assisted living thing came up. We talked a little bit back and forth. I was like, actually, I have a few friends that invest in these things. And wasn't this big deal, but as big as it is now, I think, or as popular as it is now. But they live an hour south of Boston on Cape Cod. So it's like really limited housing in general, and it's upscale. So super expensive. However, after some waiting and figuring things out, they finally got her into one. And I was there this weekend. We were visiting for the 4th of July, and we went to go see her. And that's i.e. why you popped in my head. And the type of housing that they have and the support and service is out of this world, man. There's no better place that you want a loved one to be living than one of these facilities. There's nurses in and out all the time. There's a front desk person, like a concierge, just making sure every guest that's checking in and leaving and visiting is well taken care of. And it just made me feel really good about this asset class in general, because I think a lot of people, when they think about real estate investing, they think of it as a money grab, or they're just out to make a dollar, and people running numbers all the time. But this is a real case study for life, and how we're not, as investors, we're providing housing, we're providing a solution for a problem out there. And I just want people to realize that are investing and they're buying real estate. There's so many different ways to do it. And I think what you guys are doing is incredible. If you want to dive into, the deal that you guys have currently going on and like peel back some of the layers there, we can go there next. I do want to get there, but you did pop in my head. It was really funny. You talked to the community last week. I knew you were coming on this week. And then I'm walking around this facility. I'm like, I have a million questions for you. So just kind of unpack that deal, and we'll kind of, ask you a few more questions along the way.
No, I appreciate you calling that out, because I think that is the difference between a high quality service and a mediocre nursing home facility, right? And we don't even like to use the word facility because it has a connotation of it's this kind of sterilized environment. It's not a home, right? So we're very intentional about residential assisted living home. And to your point too, there's a much bigger crossover between hospitality, something like a hotel or even like a luxury upscale short-term rental, and residential assisted living than people might think, because it's all about how you serve people, how you meet them where they are, how you personalize, how you show an interest in the things that they care about and their families care about. And if you can connect on that level, yes, it's an enormous financial decision, but it's your loved one, right? It's where they're going to potentially live out their final days. And if you can make people feel comfortable and understand that they're going to be well taken care of, and that you're not going to just, factory produce their food and serve it to them on a cafeteria tray and then sequester them in their room on medicine, you're actually going to integrate them into a community environment that can oftentimes be the difference, between a good experience and a bad experience. So I appreciate you calling that out.
Yeah, dude, 100%. And it's funny, I've had both legs of the spectrum here. So it was her wife. So my grandfather, he was in a nursing home, and I saw, this is way back when I was a kid, but you could feel the difference. It's just a different, I don't really know how to put it into words exactly, but I just know the upscale feel I had going in here. It felt safe. There's a bunch of different activities they can do. They have things in-house, right? Activities for a bunch of people. There's a little community room. They do breakfast and lunch, and then also they take them offsite to do a bunch of different things. There's a bunch of like art classes, workout classes, nature walks, and just all these things. I'm missing a bunch of them, I'm sure, but it's really cool because you feel like you're part of a community. It's not just a home. And I know this probably differs between, every person's business model, right? So I'm curious for you guys, are you going to incorporate some of these things, or is it just more so to have the facility and people can come and go as they please? How's the build out of this and like the day-to-day kind of from the experiential ideation?
Yeah. So my wife, thankfully, this is like right in her sweet spot of not only what she's passionate about, but what her professional background is too. She worked in nonprofit. She developed programs nationally for a nonprofit she worked at. She also has an academic background in human development. And so she has not only the theoretical knowledge, but also the implementation knowledge of how to serve people in different stages of their life. And combine that with the horrendous experience she had with her family members in these nursing homes. And she's got a very clear idea of some of the types of activities. There's music therapy and there's some sensory stuff that's really good for people dealing with memory care issues. And there's even types of materials and flooring, colors on the walls, like all these different things make a big difference. There's different things that can trigger people in different scenarios. And so just trying to create a soothing and comfortable environment that is not going to cause behaviors or make challenging situations any worse. Like that's step one and that's part of why we're doing a ground up development instead of finding a 6-bedroom home that we're going to, try and Frankenstein and add, turn into a 12-bedroom. Not that there's a problem, people do that and there are ways to do it successfully. But at the end of the day, we decided ground up construction was a way to control the variables and make sure it's purpose built from day one. And then the programming and the day-to-day activities, that's the sweet spot that my wife, Andrea, is going to be able to introduce.
Aaron, I think this is amazing because what I think has happened recently is that just an overall sentiment in the way that like the people, the consumers of America think is like, I personally want more privatized than like big box institutionalized products in all capacities, right? Because the bigger the business, the harder it is to make the actual quality that people need. And I think about this all the time. Professor G said this, between the ages of 35 and 50, it's really, really hard for people. Like that's us in a little bit. Like it's really hard for people because your parents end up going into they end up being not the superheroes. You end up having to take care of them. And hopefully for us, that's in the latter portion. Maybe it's 50, maybe it's 60 for us. But I'm starting to notice that as my parents are looking to retire, they always joke with me like, oh, I better be nice to you. I know you're going to put me in a nursing home. And it's like, it's a joke. It's tongue in cheek. And my dad's only 68, but I think about it every time I'm with him. I'm like, that's not 50 years away. It's like hopefully more than 20, right? Or whatever, but it's coming. So to have somebody like for us, even just me and Ryan thinking about this, having somebody in our network who runs these facilities, who you can trust, is just so much more. I'm just so much more open to the idea if I know somebody that is actually handling this rather than being like, oh, I got to go to Sunrise. And no disrespect, I'm sure they run a decent ship, but that was like where my grandmother was when she died of Alzheimer's. And I remember it being not decent. So I say that because, this is the inevitable thing of time. So I love that there's people that are privatized, that are in the game, that are trying to make the experience, and you'll know the good ones from the people who are just trying to make money. And there'll be some of those too, right? I mean, that exists. But so without being too morbid, I'd love to know about the business model of it and what you're looking to do with this ground up development project. And tell us about that.
Yeah. And one thing I just want to add to what you just said, there's something called the sandwich generation, which is essentially when you're at an age, I think you called it out, like 35 to 50, where you might have kids or plan to have kids and your parents are aging, right? Everyone ages. At some point, everyone's parents will age. and a lot of people choose to have kids. So what happens is people are stuck in this kind of limbo where you do make a lot of sacrifices and compromises when you're raising children. But then when your parents start to age, you start to feel this guilt. And some people have parents move in. Some people try and find homes for them. But you have this dual responsibility tugging at you where you're trying to serve multiple generations in your family and just do right by them. And it's very, very challenging. There's not one size fits all solution other than people start thinking about it before it becomes a problem. So I just want to share that because that's something that I think most people in some way or another will go through, is that kind of dual responsibility. And it's not really something that was obvious to me until I started studying more about this business model. So the business model itself, we're going to be building from the ground up on 7 acres of land, 2 separate 10,000 square foot, 16 bedroom, 16 private bathroom, assisted living mansions. So they will be, luxury aesthetic, high quality materials. It's built into the top end of the market. Now, when I say luxury, I don't mean some exclusive thing that is so hoity-toity that it's not relatable to the common person. When I say luxury, I mean this is going to be a comfortable place to live, nice finishes, and like I said before, purpose-built for memory care. The actual underlying business model, so residents pay an all-in one monthly bed rate. So ours will be somewhere between about $7,500 to $8,500 per month per resident. That includes the caretaking, that includes food, that includes board, and an array of services. Sometimes these types of homes have a base rate and then they charge you for every tiny little activity. So that, if you want to take a shower, it's going to be extra $500 a month. If you want to, they get very, very down to the minutia, and it ends up being upcharges like you might see on a concert or an airline ticket. It was very important to us to have transparent pricing model. So we're doing that kind of one price that includes everything. We will contract out for a lot of the actual healthcare services. So we're building right in a medical district. Closest hospital is a 2-minute drive. There's a lot of specialty doctors, home health service companies, hospice, et cetera, that are all easily accessible from the home. So we will work with families and with those providers to bring those folks into the home as needed to provide medical service. And all of it, from a marketing standpoint, there's a number of different pipelines. A lot of people come as disaffected consumers of the big box product, right? They had a horrible experience in a nursing home and they want something better. And so it's kind of considered almost the bottom of the funnel, right? People end up in a home like this when they've tried to maybe cut corners elsewhere and found it lacking, both from an experience standpoint and a quality of care. And so it's actually a really strong pull. We ran a ton of different market analysis, and even just in this tiny little radius around the land we bought, there's a 150 bed shortage at this price point as of today. We're building 32 beds and there's no other projects in the pipeline. So just from a demand dynamic standpoint, it's a big problem nationally, but even hyper locally, if you find the right plot of land, you're building into incredible demand that we should be able to hit the ground running from that perspective.
I love it, man. And you went from buying, you're still in this process of buying rental properties, which is, I'd imagine, is a little bit different of an underwriting process than going through the ground up development. So talk to us about how you're financing this project and what the steps are to actually make this happen, maybe permitting wise and all of that with township requirements.
Yeah, so it really is a whole different game than single family residential. I still believe single family residential is the single best entry point. I still believe that there's a long-term place for single family rentals in our lives. And it was one of the best building blocks to build some of the initial skills and literacy that we're using today. With that said, what we're using is an SBA loan. So without getting too deep into the different SBA loans, they have a product that allows for ground up construction. You can actually roll the land purchase, the construction, and a good portion of the startup costs into a single loan package. And because it's SBA, it has some government subsidy. It de-risks it for the bank a little bit. And ultimately what it allows is for someone like us to take on a project of this scope. Most banks probably would not touch that if not for some of the SBA backing. So we're funding through SBA loan, and then we're raising capital for the remaining portion. My wife, Andrea, and I are co-investing. We believe firmly in putting our money where our mouth is. So in addition to the time that we're dedicating towards the project, we're also co-investing. That's, I mentioned earlier, I think we sold 2 of our rentals to be able to free up some capital to put into this project. And, yeah, the capital raise is we're doing a syndication. So we started with a round of 506B raising from friends and family and our existing network, and then we just opened it up to a 506C for accredited investors only.
So for people that are listening, the accredited investors are people who've made over $200,000 over the last, I think it's a year or two. Aaron, you might have to clarify.
2 years.
2 years, yep. And then or 300,000 as a couple over the last 2 years, and or over $1 million in net worth, I think outside of your primary residence, I believe. So
correct.
That is now, if people that are looking to get into bigger deals, and Ryan and I have done this, you can go from a 506B, friends and family, raise some money into a deal that you're operating and that you found, and then switch over to a 506C. You cannot, however, start as a 506C and then go back to a 506B. And I found this out in the middle of one of the deals that we had done in Manchester, New Hampshire, where I didn't realize that you could do this until us and our operating team looked at the fine print. And I think it's awesome. So you're in this process now where you're looking to finish it up within the next month or so. I think it's great. What do you see as the future for your business model? Do you think this goes well and you become Aaron Ameen, the residential assisted living guy? Is that something that you see yourself doing in the future? Do you think that you're open to, whatever comes your way? I'm curious about your, how you see the next few years playing out.
Yeah, so I know you guys talk a lot about, personal brand and putting yourself out there and just exploring, leaning in, taking action, and seeing what comes back your way as a result, right? And I think that's what a lot of this has been for me over the last 7 years. It's been exploration, starting with that story I told you about recovery, where I kind of had to reinvent, I had to exercise the worst parts of myself and reinvent a better version of me. And I feel as if a lot of the same parallels apply on real estate. I am very grateful for the journey we had building up that initial portfolio. Most people, if they built up a portfolio that had $5,000 a month, they'd probably just let that chill. For us, we ended up refactoring because of all the different things happening in our personal life. And I think I've struggled a lot with this of, giving myself permission to evolve and lean into these new signals, right? When I talk about this residential assisted living, it fires me up. I get really excited. I love the look in my wife's eyes when we talk about this together and I see the passion she has it and the vision she has for it. I love the ability to have an impact and even just chip away a small but still meaningful chunk of the supply demand shortage that's coming up for our country and our local area. We're adding jobs to the community. There's so many things about this that I like that I think I would be a fool not to lean into it with all of my heart. So I do believe that, for the foreseeable future, this is what we're going to be focused on. We're also really enjoying working together. This is the epitome of what I said earlier, where we do own our upside in the sense that we're creating value for society and we're also able to grow alongside that, grow our wealth, grow our, personal real estate journey. And once we do this the first time, the first is typically the hardest. You're going through a lot of firsts, you're learning a lot of lessons. The financing is typically harder. Raising money can be typically harder. But deal number 2, deal number 3, we'll be able to qualify for more favorable financing. We'll have a track record that we can hang our hat on, and we'll have existing relationships. So I think it would be foolish to go through all this effort and not continue to press forward.
Yeah, I like what you said. Give yourself permission to pivot there, because there's this balance that I find in business owners and people that are investing in real estate. It's like, do one thing for 10 years and become, or whatever, 5 years and become really, really good at it, and don't diversify. Like, for example, Ryan and I have sort of, in a way, walked back a sentiment that's like millionaires have 7 streams of income. And I used to think that when I was getting started. And then I realized, wait a second, millionaires, actually what they do is they get really good at 1 or 2 things and they build a bridge all the way across. And then from the income that they come in, they invest it in maybe 7 different things to diversify once they're at the diversification pivotal moment in they're able to actually do that. So how do you factor in, hey, I'm going to change my model of the buying the rental properties and go into this? And how do you decide that that's not a quote unquote shiny object? Is it because of the passion that you're like, hey, this is like, I'm driven to do this, and this is the thing that really like lights me up? Because to me, that seems like a good reason to get involved with it.
Yeah, no, I love the question. And I think there's a few things here. Number one is, yes, the passion, right? And understanding that this aligns not only with any objectives we have financially, but also the impact that we want our family to have in this world, right? Not from an ego standpoint, but genuinely, we want to make contributions to what we believe to be a pretty existential problem that's coming our way over the next couple decades. The more we learned about that, the more obvious it became that this is a good place to focus our efforts. It's also something that hits very, very close to home for just about everyone. Anybody that we've socialized this idea with or told it about, either they have a parent or a grandparent that's gone through something similar, or they're about to. I mean, it's astonishing how many conversations we've had that, unfortunately, some of them are about how broken the system is and horrible experiences. Some of them are positive, and we're learning about other operators and people who have done this well. But as far as the shiny object, I think one of the things I like the most about residential assisted living is that the barriers to entry are so high that if you've made it past that first couple months of research and discovery and you're still going, you've probably outlasted 99% of the people that ever think about starting residential assisted living. It takes a long time. The timelines are long for licensing. The timelines are long for permitting and construction and renovation. The timelines are long to fill beds and lease up and build a brand. So it's a small business transposed on top of a real estate play. And I think if people are just in it for money, the challenges that they're going to face in this type of industry are going to be strong enough to sway them to whatever the next shiny object that might come along is. And I think I like that. I appreciate that about this asset, is that it has that impact component, but also at the end of the day, I truly believe that a lot of people might not go down this path once they realize how much work it is. And that makes it easier to provide a higher quality product and stand out as an operator in this field.
Beautiful, man. Last question for me, as we wind down here. For people that don't know Aaron, I've gotten to know you over the past couple of years, and you're one of the more organized individuals that I know. Just like, you're prompt, you're on time, you do what you say. And I can really appreciate that coming from this world that is full of whatever. It's the internet, it's false promises. You and I have never met in person. You know what I mean? Like, I don't know you, I don't know your family, but like to have conversations and be consistent and show up and do things for each other. Like, I've just valued the friendship that we've created. So it leads me into my question about, because we have similar thought processes, I think, on this. Like, what is your why? You've talked about family, you've talked about the impact, but what we're doing here is not easy. And anyone can attest to that. Building a business, working your 9 to 5, investing in real estate, it's taxing, it's worth it. But what's the reason, what gets you out of bed every morning, and what's your ultimate overarching why?
Yeah, no, I always love this question. I don't think it honestly can be asked enough. I think we should ask ourselves that pretty regularly, because sometimes it can change too. But I am not a yacht or a Rolex guy. That's not the stuff that fires me up. What fires me up is being able to build and maintain quality relationships. In order to do that, I need some degree of control over my time. And in order to have control over your time, that means you typically need a certain amount of money, right? So I am not in this for money per se. However, I recognize that money is the tool that will get me to the actual why, which is building those meaningful relationships. So I think that, when we refactored and said, hey, single family rentals on our income with our expense profile with 3 children are not going to get us there, that pivot was designed to find a new opportunity or a new model that could get us there. So from a financial standpoint, that's how we ended up at residential assisted living. But the overlay of all these other wonderful reasons to be in that field have lined up very well. But at the end of the day, I mean, I talked about the sandwich generation earlier. I have young kids that I want to spend as much time with as I possibly can while they're growing up and while they still want to have something to do with us. Kids, by the time they're 10, 11, they have their own friends, and, you can have a good relationship with them, but at some point you're not their everything anymore. And I already recognize how short that window is. So I'm very, very determined not to squander that. And number 2, as my parents get older, thankfully I have great relationships with them, but I also want to be able to spend time with them freely. They live in different places across the country. So being location flexible or location independent and having control of my time so that I can spend it with my friends and family, that's what gets me out of bed in the morning.
I love it, dude. I think that one of the things that I wouldn't say I learned this from you, but you've confirmed it for me, is that you can create a life that you decide the path. And there's a billion ways to live one. And you've done a certain thing where you're this hybrid investor. You invest in 4 different areas or 3 different areas in the country. You've moved around, you've made changes, you've pivoted. And this thing doesn't have to be cookie cutter and linear. And you don't have to live that way just because that's how you see other people living. And I understand that Instagram and social media glorifies being an entrepreneur. I can tell you firsthand that it should not be glorified. It is not for everyone. We have ups, downs. To me, it is without a doubt 100% worth it in every aspect. It's not even close, but that doesn't mean it's for everyone. And I think that the more people that realize there's a million ways to live a life, and if you want to work your 9 to 5 and you love it, and I heard this today on a podcast I was listening to. It's like, Simon Sinek, I don't know if that's how you pronounce his last name, but he was saying that work used to be a means to live your life, and then people would separate them, and then they just did that to make money so that they could do the endeavors that they wanted to do and live the life that they wanted to live. Now it has been more so intertwined into this purpose-driven, like business, because you're all on 24/7, you have computers in your pockets. It doesn't have to be like that. I mean, we're the Wealth Juice podcast. We talk about building wealth, and a lot of that is like, you have to be a little bit psychotic in certain ways to want to do it. But you have helped, even in probably ways you don't realize, just made me realize like, well, there's so many ways to do this. You've maintained your job for 10, 12 years while you're building this. REI, everyone knows that REI still has his full-time job. I don't. It's a balance. And I don't think that you have to make a finite decision just based on what you see other people do, and you can create your own way. So that's
the feeling's very much mutual. I mean, you guys, by virtue of running a podcast, you've spent more time in my head than you realize too, right? And I've learned so much from listening to you guys, not only the conversations that you've had with your guests, but also just from your own stories. And Corey, I definitely treasure the time we spent together in a pod. I learned so much from you, and I know we've been able to help each other in different ways throughout the years, and I don't take any of that for granted.
I appreciate it, man. It's cool to just watch somebody else, that you've never met, relate to. And I think it's just, anybody can do this. Anybody can play this game, I guess is where I want to leave this. Just anyone can play this game. And it's about finding people that you can, like, I texted you and you were like, hey, I'm listening to your podcast right now. I just thought that was so cool. Like, I don't, how is that? How random is that? So Aaron, I appreciate you coming on. If people want to learn more about you, they want to maybe invest with you, they want to network, they want to learn more about your program, what's the best way for people to get in touch with you?
Yeah, so as you've probably seen throughout this interview, my primary focus right now outside of my job and family is on Everwood Reserve, which is the name of our memory care project. So everwoodreserve.com is where you can find all the information, not only about the project, but if you're interested in learning about investing with us, or if you just want to learn more about the business model, there's a ton of different information about our business plan. We have a custom calculator there where you can model out what your returns would look like if you did invest. So everwoodreserve.com is the best place to go as of now.
Aaron, thank you so much for coming on, brother. This has been a pleasure. We appreciate your time.
Thank you for having me.